This is Shoji Hamada, the leading potter of Japan, at his Chinese chestnut hand-turned wheel in his studio in Mashiko in the autumn of 1970. I had gone there to do the notes for the book. He'd asked me to write about his way and work. Hamada chose the village of Mashiko, 2 hours north of Tokyo by train, to establish his own pottery in 1923 because this was the village well known for making the teapots, decorated by Masa Minigawa, the little old lady, as Bernard Leach called her. She had painted the same mountain scene thousands of times on thousands of teapots all her life. Here is Hamada's 7-acre compound in the hills above Mashiko Valley. Hamada bought this land in 1923 when he returned from Cornwall, England, that is, where for 3 years he helped Bernard Leach establish his pottery. To this Mashiko land, Hamada brought 10 old farm and gatehouses that he cajoled farmers into selling him. He took them apart and carried them by ox to his place. This was a working farm, rice straw, vegetables, especially the huge white daikon, a horseradish that's used for pickling. Hamada loved it. Farming was as much a part of life as pottery. It was all part of his way and work. Wood for firing piled everywhere, thatched roofs, front yard of the family house, cuttings for more plants, kittens everywhere. Mrs. Hamada airing her husband's western clothes. That indicates he's just back from a trip. The old Meiji house with shell shoji screens at the window, heavy thatched roof, parchment umbrellas. This house now served as Hamada's museum house. The old curator kept track of all Hamada's collection, unpacked and aired every piece once a year. Hamada had 300 17th century Windsor chairs from American England and folk art from all over, all cultures of the world. In his own family room were old Spanish chests. He loved the carving, some of his own pots. He loved old furniture. Particularly in America, he visited antique shops, sketching as was his own method of remembering. Furniture, Pennsylvania Dutch pottery, Italian maiolica, American wooden duck decoys, and things like that. He sketched everything to etch it into his memory, he said. He himself collected folk art of all cultures, made by anonymous craftsmen of the world. He endowed 6 museums in Japan and 1 in Okinawa with his own collections. For some years, he served also as director of the Mingei-kan Museums. That was the name they gave to the folk art museums. He served as director of the Mingei-kan in Tokyo and Karashiki. Hamada's studio was up the hill. Inside was a dirt floor, shelves on tree stumps. Shinsaku, Hamada's #1 son in pottery, wedges clay for his father from a 100-pound bung. Chrysanthemum-style wedging, and Uma-san, one of the workers, here all his life, trims a big bowl on the Korean kick wheel. Behind the compound is Kitagoya, a mountain of clay. Hamada said there were 17 kinds of clay here. Some potters wanted only one clay, but Hamada used them all, just as they were pickaxed off the hill. The raw clay was slaked in water and screened back and forth for several weeks by farmers who lived nearby, and then it was dried to the plastic stage and brought down to the potters. Hamada bought enough clay at one time to serve for 1 whole year. He stored the clay in a mound in the studio where it developed a hard crust that they had to cut through to get to the moist plastic clay. Hamada's workers and Shinsaku, the #1 son, hand-wedged every piece of clay 2 whole hours before it was thrown on the potter's wheel. Here Hamada removes one of the pots he's just thrown with a bamboo cradle. These pots were made with the throw and coil method. Here a tall vase is being faceted with an old Okinawan fish knife. Hamada said that only this kind of fish knife would do. He didn't throw the pots he was going to fasten any thicker, so he had to watch that wall. Here Hamada has paddled the sides of a thrown jar. He fondles it and then he trims it. Now he's cutting his sugarcane design into the side of a vase with a sharp metal tool. All finished pots are dried outside in the sun. Then the pots are carried down from the studio to the 5-chamber Noborigama kiln, carried down the hill. About 3,000 pots will be loaded in this kiln to be bisque-fired. Here the workers, some extra ones hired for the glazing operation, are whisking off the sticky wood ash from the bisque fire. Hamada did not glaze every pot, but he decorated every pot. The workers are beginning to glaze, and Hamada is using paraffin to wax out his bamboo design over a clear glazed piece, which will have another glaze poured over it to reveal this bamboo design. Workers take the piece away and bring him another one. He changes shapes and designs very often. Two grandchildren he adores, Shinsaku's sons, are allowed to decorate a few $5,000 Hamada pots in each kiln using their grandfather's handmade brushes. Hamada kept Akita dogs and cut hairs on the ruff of their necks to make his own brushes. Hamada is jolly and relaxed and gregarious, telling stories, joking. He loves the glazing time. It's a relaxing time for him. The workers glaze the big bowls that are too heavy for Hamada to lift now, but he decorates every one. Here he's doing his finger pull design, one glaze through another. And a ladle pour design, black glaze poured over the white rice husk ash glaze. Imagine taking husks of kernels of rice and burning a mound of it into ash to mix with water for a glaze. Just imagine doing that. All Hamada's materials were natural. Wood ash, feldspathic rock, mashiko rock for the famous kaki glaze, and this rice husk ash glaze. Hamada paints a big bowl with beautiful strokes from his handmade brush in the bamboo and sugarcane patterns that he's been using for 50 years. He says it's the same pattern, but it's always different. He's using manganese-cobalt combination for the black and red iron for brown. Then he waxes off circles for a resist design when another glaze is poured over. Toyota-san pours the kaki glaze over the waxed off areas on this bowl that are resisting the glaze. The huge kiln is being loaded all the days of the glazing cycle. As the work is glazed, it's placed. Saggers carrying many plates will be stacked up inside the kiln, protecting the plates from the flying wood ash. Shinsaku's still glazing and Hamada's still decorating at night as the workers load the kiln. The door of each chamber is bricked up after the chamber is full, and fine, wet sand is swished over to keep the heat in. Portholes for stoking are left in each door. The big kiln looks like a dragon. Hamada is giving the Buddhist offering, sake and salt, to the gods for good luck before he's lighting the kiln. Smoke and moisture come from the flue at the top of the kiln and into the sun. Workers relax at the fire now, and then they begin to bring the wood from all parts of the compound down to the kiln for firing. The red pine is in bundles of 40 sticks each for one stoke at a time. All the wood carried here and piled up will be used in this firing. Old Man, whose name I never knew, is in charge of stoking the firebox. The workers function in teams of 4, working 4 hours at a shift, then sleeping for the 3 days and nights this firing will take. The food is brought down from the main house constantly, rice and candy for energy and tea. The kiln begins to get hot in the first chamber. Uma-san checks the look of the fire inside, the turbulence in the kiln. He decides to unblock the peeps on either side of the firebox for stoking with smaller kindling. Shoji Hamada's 11-year deshi, been there 11 years, stokes on the other side with Uma-san. Both of them keep up a rhythm. The fire is hotter now in the first chamber. Workers sleep when they aren't on. The portholes along the kiln are belching fire now. Uma-san begins stoking the first chamber now, after the firebox is full, and he will stoke until he brings it to top temperature. A draw trial is pulled to show Hamada how the glaze on this test tile is beginning to mature. Many draw trials will be pulled all during this firing. Hamada observes the glaze melt on the tiles. Then he goes to look at the kiln inside himself to check the turbulence of the fire. As Bernard Leach said, if you want to know how a kiln really looks inside, you better get in there yourself. I've gone out to the rice field to watch the smoke that comes from the kiln. This black smoke doesn't indicate reduction atmosphere. Rather, it's from the impurities in the red pine of the wood that is continuously being stoked for these 3 days and 3 nights. Side chambers are being stoked now, one man on each side of the kiln, simultaneously throwing in the wood even if they can't see each other. The flue is totally on fire. And the firebox is full of coals. The side chambers are being stoked on the other side now, one man on each side of the kiln, stoking the wood simultaneously. Each of the 5 chambers has to be stoked until it reaches the top temperature. The flue is totally on fire. And then it stops. The firing is over. We go to the hills, to the temple, to give thanks for the good firing in the morning dawn. Then we return to Hamada's main house, where Shinsaku's wife, Teruko, makes festival rice. Rice and red beans, this is what they always make for festivities. She hands each one of us a tumbler of scotch for this festive breakfast. Three days later, the kiln is calm, and workers begin to chip away the crusted sand that mudded up the doors of the chambers. Hamada gets first peek into the kiln, talking to the workers about the firing, and then he carefully extracts a few pieces. He seems happy about the look of the pots. This kiln holds about 3,000 pots. While I filmed this, I knew Hamada was pleased with this firing. Workers begin to take out the beautiful pots. They will carry them down to the bottom of the hill. Okasan, Hamada's 11-year deshi, was in charge of the firing. Now he's in charge of the unpacking. Okasan left Hamada the next year after we made this film to build his own pottery in another area of Japan. Some of the best pots are spirited away to be kept for museums and important collectors. Hamada looks at everything, examines everything very carefully. Here's one of the pots that we saw Hamada making earlier, where he was paddling the side of the pot in the raw state. I can see that he's very happy with that particular pot. They continued to bring the 3,000 pots down to the bottom of the hill. His friend of 50 years, Sakuma Sensei, in whose father's pottery he worked when he first came to Mashiko in 1923, and Shimaoka Sensei, his next-door neighbor, are the only ones invited to the kiln opening. Hamada points out details as they all look at the pots. This kiln with the 3,000 pots is fired about every 6 weeks. And then after this, the salt glaze kiln with about 300 pots that takes 3 weeks to make. That will be fired. And after that, the enamel kiln, overglaze enamel kiln. Here is one of the white ladle pours on top of the two-colored glaze, and the black ladle pour over the white rice husk ash glaze, and the overglaze enamels on stoneware and the pieces he made in Okinawa. About every 3 or 4 days, an enamel kiln was fired with 14 or 15 pieces in it all the time, day in and day out. And here's the piece we saw him tool a design on, now covered with a wood ash glaze. Hamada sketches everything. Even if he has fired these kilns 50 years, he still sketches to remember. Same designs, same patterns year after year. The finger pull design with the rice husk ash glazed lip. The bamboo and sugarcane design we saw him making with the wax resist. Another overglaze enamel pattern. The very few pieces that don't come out of the kiln properly are just strewn around the compound, catching leaves, catching water. My ex-student in ceramics and in Japanese language joined me in Mashiko to help translate. Here we're walking with Hamada to the top of his compound, where the thatched grass is grown to repair the roots. Hamada thought that Debbie, who was 6 foot tall, spoke Japanese better than most Japanese. Every few days, Hamada paints overglaze enamels on the stoneware and on the pots that he's made in Okinawa. He has his enamels ground in Kyoto by, he says, an old blind woman who doesn't mind grinding for days. And then he grinds them again in the mortar and pestle when he gets the enamels from Kyoto. Tea is used as the medium for the enamels. Every few days, the enamel kiln was fired to 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit. Once a year, Hamada exhibited at Mitsukoshi department store in Tokyo. People waited for hours before the 10 a.m. opening. Then they ran inside to get a first look. Cards in front of each pot with the price are picked up by buyers and later perhaps traded among each other. Of course, everything sells to these avid collectors. Choosing these pots is very serious business. In those days, a tea ceremony bowl went for about $1,000. Not as much as those of famous tea masters, because Hamada wanted common man to be able to buy his tea bowl. Other tea bowls from famous tea masters would go for $10,000 up. A stoneware bottle with sugar cane decoration, a salt glazed batter bowl, a beautiful salt glazed jar with white engobe and iron decoration, another overglazed enamel tea ceremony bowl, and a salt glazed tea ceremony bowl, and an overglazed enamel on a summer tea bowl. Tea bowl was made in Okinawa, Okinawan clay, and the glaze of crushed coral. My opportunity was rare and wonderful those months I spent in 1970 at Hamada's compound, and I visited many more subsequent times. Hamada was one of the greatest ceramic artists of our century. He died in 1978.